Hello, adventurers. My name's Tyler.
And I'm Richard.
On today's episode, we're giving our official review of Dreams and Machines. Welcome to True Strike.
Howdy, folks.
I beat him.
No, horrible person. Put me off my game. Howdy, folks.
Speaking of game.
And welcome back to the show. We're talking about a new game today.
Yeah. One we hadn't played yet, but
One
have
we
been
haven't
interested in
played.
since last year's Gen Con.
Yeah, if you go back and listen to some of the older episodes, we mentioned it at least once before in things that we were looking at when we were at Gen Con. One of those games was from Modiphius Entertainment. It was Dreams and Machines.
Yeah. Friends of the show.
Yeah. So when Modiphius reached out to us and said, hey, is there anything in our catalog that you would be interested in looking at? We said, absolutely.
100%.
And we said this one and something else.
Yep.
Which we'll talk about at a later date, right?
Sure.
Or do you want to talk about it now?
Dune.
Dune? Dune, you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was Dreams and Machines and Dune were the two things that we were most interested in. You more so Dune, me more so Dreams and Machines.
Yeah, it worked out that way.
And it worked out just fine.
Yep.
So yeah, we said excellent. We would definitely be interested into it. And they sent us the Gamemaster's Guide and the Player's Guide.
Yep.
So if you've watched the channel, you will see that there is a live action of this up and ready to listen to, right?
Yeah, we have audio, actual play for this.
Yeah, audio for this. First and foremost, I guess I should say this right off the jump. If you're coming from that does not have a ton to do with these books. And that is because I got these books and read them. So I got the Game Master's Guide and I got the Player's Guide. And I started reading through them. And I noticed that they did have a game in here. And I was like, ooh, I want to run this game. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, this looks like a lot of fun. And then the very first part of it was all like, hey, this is kind of a continuation of the game in the starter set.
Mm-hmm.
And I was all like, oh, interesting. Now, from Gen Con last year, I had a quick start guide that we got from Modiphius's booth.
Yep.
And I still had that, and I read through it, and I really liked it, and I was probably going to incorporate a little bit in there. But then I got to looking at the actual starter set. And so they provided us with these books. The starter set, I went and got myself.
Yes, so take this review with a grain of salt, of course. You know, sure, we might be Modiphius shills for all you know. Our opinion is our own. We weren't told to say anything one way or the other, but they did provide these books.
Yes, they did provide these books.
They did not provide the starter set.
They did not provide the starter set, which should tell you a little bit of something right there. Because I was able to look at these books and from there decided to spend my own money to buy something that wasn't necessary.
Right.
Because I could have gone through and we could have actually run the game that's in here. The little, thing that's in here is very usable and it's very good. And I do eventually want to run it.
And you fully read both books.
And I fully read both books. Also, I could have easily made my own campaign for this based off of what was in here, which was my original idea. I actually had already written up something after reading these two books of what I was going to run my players through. But then I was quite impressed with what I saw and decided to buy the starter set on my own.
It's funny how we both kind of ended up doing that with our games.
Yeah.
We were going to run like made up homebrew stories and everything, and both of us settled on a quick start adventure instead.
On a quick start adventure, yeah. So it was interesting. But that being said, if you want to go ahead and listen to that, if you haven't already, I think it was available and it's audio only. We're still trying to work out the kinks as far as video is considered.
Our camera crashed.
Yes.
We filmed video.
Yep.
You'll never see it.
Yeah.
We'll never see it.
We've always joked about like, oh, is this the episode where the camera crashes and we don't have any video and we have to re-record everything? This was the day that it happened. We got up and looked at the camera and it was a quarter of the screen was video. The rest of it was completely black and it had just basically stopped going about halfway through.
Luckily, our audio didn't crash, so it was usable.
Yeah.
Is it the best audio? No, we're working on that too. However, pretty good.
Yeah, what we have there is usable.
Significantly better than no video.
Yep.
So
is it the best playthrough of Dreams and Machines with the most intricate and fully understanding of all mechanics, no mistakes made ever? No, but it was still fun and it was still interesting
for a bunch of people who have never played it.
Yes.
Or didn't know the system, didn't have characters made for the most part, just completely blind going into it. We did it and we had fun, and I'm looking forward to playing it again.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's jump into the things that they actually sent us and talk about these, because this here is what we're here about here
Yes,
today.
and I'll be reacting more to these than anything else.
Yeah, because I don't know, you haven't actually had a chance to read these books at all.
Neither of them. No.
Yeah, because
all my time's been with Dune.
Yeah, all your time has been with Dune.
I've seen the art.
Yeah.
I can speak to that.
So yeah, I did show you a lot of the artwork
Show
in
that
this,
one.
because the artwork in these books is quite amazing. There's a lot of full page art as well as half page art for showing all kinds of stuff. I think the first thing, number one, is the books are very well made. These are premium books. I don't know what the actual retail is on these. Do you? Is it below the $40 mark?
I think currently you can get them on Amazon for less than a $40 mark.
Okay, so
I'll look into it right now.
they feel like a pretty premium book. The covers are really nice. The spine is really good. This is not a smaller book, so each one is about the same. You're looking at about 225 pages of content in here. So they don't feel like a cheap book at all. They're actually really, really nice. And the artwork is great throughout. There's a lot of really good stuff in here. I think one of my favorite things about this book is the way that it is written is very unique. And that is that it is in a very specific style, as in being told to you by somebody.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So this right here is Carrie's storybook. So this right here is kind of like the opening of the player's guide. You don't get this in the Game Master's guide. You get this in the player's guide. But essentially, the way these books are laid out, as far as artwork is considered, is that there's a lot of scribbling. So on pages, you'll notice like hand-drawn art, and there will be things like pressed flowers taped to some of these pages. There will be like drawings of monsters, and then like words in here talking about some of the equipment or things that you see. And this is all phrasing from this one character, Carrie. So these are basically set to you as in her journals about this world that you're living in, essentially, which I thought was kind of a cute way of doing things, and a neat way to present this information.
Yeah.
What'd you find?
So if you are on Modiphius' website, you can get the starter set for $39, but you can get these core books for $45.33 each. Now, if you swing your way over to Amazon, you can get each of them for $36.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, if you're looking to expand the process, if you're just interested in like touching this, right? If you go to Modiphius' website, the quick start guide, not the starter set, but the quick start guide, you can get the PDF for that for free. Absolutely $0.
And this is what we picked up at Gen Con, correct?
Exactly.
Yes. Which is a full story that you can play through.
Totally.
Yeah.
There's also for free, they have character sheet PDF and my favorite, coloring book.
Hey, Carrie's
so
coloring
they have a
book? That's cool.
It's art from the game, but fully black and white for you to color in yourself.
Neat.
Yeah. So feel free to pick it up there or Amazon. We don't have affiliate links or anything like that. I'll list stuff down below, but you know, we don't make anything on it.
Yeah. So yeah, the books are very well laid out. As far as they're considered, so your Game Master guide and your player's guide, they do share some stuff which is identical in both books. So the intro is pretty much identical, which gives you the history of the world that you're going to be playing in, which is very fleshed out. And that is basically the story of Avera Prime. So this is a planet that is not Earth. It's a planet that is in the Goldilocks zone of another solar system that has year cycles that are like 606 days or something like that.
You've learned so much from these books.
Yeah, so it's basically a planet that was colonized and then cut off from civilization completely. So completely cut off from Earth for some mysterious reason, at which point AI becomes a big building block for the society, building large machines. After centuries of peace with these large machines, AI starts to go wonky because of reasons which you guys didn't get into because it's in the starter set, but essentially there is an entity that takes over the AI and makes it go crazy and start killing people. So now we are far flung about 200 years after the AI goes crazy and humanity beats it, but not without massive casualties. And what you're stuck with is a world very reminiscent of Horizon on PlayStation.
Yep. Horizon Zero Dawn and
Horizon Zero Dawn and such. Yeah. So you have humanity is smaller tribes that are surviving, working with and around technology, and then machines that are crazy that will kill you, and people that worship those machines and will use those machines to try and kill you.
It's interesting the bleed over now they think about it between this and Dune. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're getting away from the thinking machines.
Yeah, getting away from the thinking machines, yeah. But yeah, if you're familiar with Horizon, you will not be unfamiliar with this setting, because that's pretty much exactly what it is.
It's just a Dune prequel.
So it, like I said, the intro, both books carry that same thing. The next thing is the history and the lore section, which I just kind of went over. Identical in both books. So it's word for word. History and lore is the same in both of these books. And then you get to like the factions, again, identical in both books. It talks about the different factions of people that live on this planet.
And is the idea here that like you have a book for the players, you have a book for the GM?
Yes,
Like
I think
you don't need to read through both as the GM. Would you need to read through?
And
the
I'm going
to
get to that. We're definitely going to get to that.
Okay.
If you are going to GM this game, I highly recommend you read both.
You do?
Yes.
Interesting.
I highly recommend you read both of these, because once you get past that factions, now the similarities start to dwindle between these two books.
It's just interesting that, you know, as much book as you're paying for, that do you believe, like, what's the point of the overlap? Is that necessary?
So I'm not sure. I believe really what it comes down to is I think it's different ways to approach this game, because at this point you're learning the same lore, right? And you're learning the same information.
Yeah.
Where it now changes over is the types of mechanics that get discussed in the Game Master's Guide versus the Player's Guide are simply that. They are geared towards game mastering stuff.
Right.
Not playing the game, which the Player's Guide is set to. So I think that it is set up to where you definitely can slide this book across the table to your player and have them read it before you play to have a greater understanding of what's going on. But I think as a game master, it would be remiss not to recommend reading them both, because one, you get a better idea of what the players are reading.
Yeah.
And you're getting a little bit different and slightly more useful information for some scenarios in the Player's Guide that you're not getting in the Game Master's Guide.
But why could that history and faction information not just be in the Player's Guide and the GM read both?
That probably, I think the reason for that is probably because it would have made the GM's Guide that much thinner.
So you think it's fluff?
So I think that they did fluff them up a little bit. And I think you probably could get away with not reading the Player's Guide. However, I really think you should. And I think that's probably going to be one of the faults of this set, right? Because it's not all rainbows and kittens. These are very good books, but I do have some negatives, which we'll get to. As far as the content that's in here, like I said, the GM guide, so you get intro, history, factions. The next thing you get onto is Game Master guidance. So the biggest thing about these two books and this game in general is that this game is very much geared towards non-TTRPG players. These books are written in a way that is extremely hand-holdy to a point. Almost not enough, though, which is one of the things I'm going to ding on them. But it's very hand-holdy because this system is not a very complex system. It's the 2D20 system, which we've talked about very briefly here. But it is very much framed as in you've never played a TTRPG. So they go through the extreme basics in the Game Master's Guide down to like, this is how you set a scene, right? This is what should be important to you as you lay out a scene for your players so that they understand what's happening in this scene. This is how you manipulate this scene. And they've even built in mechanics, which would be the threat levels, which is very similar to the fear that you get in Daggerheart.
Yeah.
So they build in threat so that you as a GM have a currency to spend to manipulate a scene. Whereas if you're somebody who DMs games already, these are things that you already do.
Yeah.
Right. As a game master, you already know how to manipulate a scene. You already know that you don't need a currency to see the tide of things and be able to change it to keep your players engaged. This game has a mechanic for it, which is optional. There's actually rules in here where they say you don't have to do these things. You can just do them. But they have these built-in mechanics that allow you to do this to further hold your hand in how to play this game. And that extends to the Player's Guide and the Game Master's Guide. So it is very good in that respect. Where it does fail slightly, and this is why I say that you need to read both of these books, is that some of these mechanics are not as detailed as they need to be. So things like combat are kind of glossed over in some areas to where you have to look at multiple sources to get a better idea of how combat is supposed to be played out. Like just for instance, so we're running on a 2d20 system where you roll 2 different dice, right?
Yeah.
So you have 2 different skill sets essentially. One's a higher number, one's a lower number. You roll 2d20, and then you set a difficulty for the task as a game master. So I can say, like, moving this rubble pile is going to cost you 2 difficulty. It's going to be 2 difficult.
Yeah, you're not looking for the number they're rolling for.
No.
You're looking for successes.
You're looking
and
for
failures.
successes and failures. So when you roll those 2d6, if the high number is a 12 and the low number is a 6, every number on those 2d20 that I roll that's under a 12 is a single success. Any number that I roll under the secondary, the lower number, is a double success. So if I roll 2 10s, that's 2 successes, I succeed the task. If I roll, 1 5 and then 1 10, that's actually 3 successes. At which point you not only pass the thing, but you gain something called momentum, which is another group token that goes in the middle of the pool that allows you to do more actions, basically.
Sometimes you'll have very little of, sometimes you'll have a ton of.
Yeah, you'll have a ton of it. So it's a very interesting system in how that works, and how it works with combat is a little bit different. So in combat, you actually are rolling contest rolls. So you're rolling a defensive roll that has a certain number of successes.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a defensive roll of 2, that means your offensive roll has to have at least 2 to be an actual offense that hits me.
Right.
This is not incredibly easy to glean from both of these books. It's easier to read both of these books and look at the quick rules guide in the quick start guide to get a better idea of what combat is. But if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to miss in this book.
Interesting.
And I think that's because and I thought about this after we played the game, and the more I kind of just thought back on the game and how it ran and how the books read, the reason is I think that combat is not what they are touting as the big portion of this game.
Oh,
so
is that just a thing with Modiphius and their 2d20 system? Because Dune, like I've already mentioned to you, we haven't played it yet. But
just
that's right. Reading through it like doesn't want you to fight most of the time. It's all about like social escalation and stuff like that.
Yeah,
fighting is possible.
Fighting is possible,
but it's not the focus of the game.
I think that there's more fighting in this, obviously, than there would be in Dune. There's a lot more fighting in this. But the thing about this game is it's not traditional fighting like you'd see in most TTRPGs. The fights are usually a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And that's because most everything in this game, including the PCs, only have 1 hit point.
Yeah.
Before you're out of that scene, right? So if you get 1 hit, you're down for the scene.
It's rough. Yeah.
If you hit 1 enemy 1 time, the majority of them, they're down for the scene. A lot of enemies have fleeing mechanics. They'll run if they feel overwhelmed, or if you really, really damage their, main leader, which happened in our game. You absolutely destroyed the leader of a team and they booked it out almost immediately. Very rarely do you get to something that's even bigger. So the main boss battle of the starter game that we hit on, he only had 2 injuries. You only had to hit him 2 times to knock him down and completely kill him, which is not a lot of stuff. So it's like this game seems to be a little bit more focused on the roleplay element of things.
He did have armor and stuff, though.
Yeah, he does have armor. Yeah, there's
damage.
all that stuff. So there's armor that you have to use to mitigate things. But I do think that it is very easy to miss in these books. And I think that's my first negative, is it's a lot easier to miss things.
Okay.
The next thing in the GM's guide, it goes over a lot of different info. So you have essentially, after the factions, you go into the gameplay guidance, which I said is the one where it's teaching you how to play the game.
Yeah.
Whereas the player's guide, they don't go over teaching you how to run a game. They go over the core mechanics of the game.
That's fair.
Which is really good. So they go over the core mechanics in the Game Master's guide as well. But I feel like they go over the core mechanics better in the player's guide, which is why I think that as a game master, you should read both, because it is different. Before, in the factions and lore and everything like that, it is word for word. Once you start talking about core mechanics, the Game Master's guide focuses a lot more on how to run a game, and the core mechanics are in there. But I think you'll get a better grasp if you switch back and forth between the books and you move back and forth. The next thing that you have in the Game Master's Guide is kind of info on the main city that is part of the starter set, and presumably most games are going to start in, because it's a really good jumping off point. It's like the big city on Avera Prime, the planet, which is New Mossgrove, and then it immediately jumps right into the actual game itself, like the starter game. The player's guide, again, you do intro, you do history and lore, then you hit those core mechanics that I was talking about, which is why I say that this is where, as a GM, you should also jump right over and
This is the part
read
for
those
everybody.
core mechanics. Yeah, this is for everybody to read. There's also conflict in here, which is really good. It's missing from the Game Master's Guide, which is just more information on how to process conflict as from a player side. But I think it's a good thing to read as a game master too. They touch on it a little bit in the Game Master's Guide, but I think that it's also good for the game master to have this point of view as well, as far as like looking at conflict. And when I say conflict, I don't just mean combat. I mean like political or social conflict,
Right.
that sort of a thing. Then you get to another section, which is character information, which is all about the different characters that you can play in this game, which again is something that seems like they probably could have put in the Game Master's Guide as well, but they didn't. And it's in here, and that's the actual character classes information. So like what you're actually playing and the different essentially archetypes, or what are essentially
Will be a
subclasses.
subclass,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that kind of information is in here. And then you get to equipments. Again, more information that's not in the Game Master's Guide, so to speak, that is in the Player's Guide. So again, more stuff as a game master that you really should be reviewing and looking at is that equipment section. And then going into basically glyphs and warding, which is kind of the magic of the realm. It's not magic, but it's magic-y.
Right. I'm not even sure if I ran that right. Like I kind of just ran with it based on how the ability was written. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to ask you, but
It's interesting. And like I said, I'm sure we didn't run everything like the way it was supposed to go 100%, because obviously this is my first time running it, and then running it with a bunch of people on a recording adds another
but
level
I just
to
said
it
a
too.
thing and I waited to see if you told me no, and you didn't, so I kept doing it.
Yeah. So but yeah, that kind of book wraps up a little bit at the end after glyphs and warding. But there also is more information in this book too that's not in the actual GM's guide. When you get to the back, the more expanded equipment information is very, very helpful, as well as things like vehicles. They don't touch on vehicles at all in the Game Master's Guide. It's in the Player's Guide that you're going to read about those vehicles. Yeah. And then the Game Master Guide also, I forgot to mention this too, does actually have stats for NPCs and monsters too. So that's NPCs as far as like everything from like animals to like things that you're going to be fighting. So if you come in here, you'll get to see stuff like many legs or a prowl cat.
That prowl cat,
two things that you didn't actually face because of choices that you made in the campaign that you did. Oh yeah, these were both these were both options of things that you could have encountered in the game. So overall, the books are very good. They're well laid out, but I do think that they could be slightly better. And I think one of those is, one, making sure that all the information the Game Master needs is in the Game Master's Guide, to where the Game Master isn't also required to read the Player's Guide. Because I do believe that you have to read this Player's Guide if you're going to be successful at running this game.
Tell that to Watson.
Just
they do the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's one thing, actually. I don't want to harsh on Modiphius' vibe.
Oh no, everybody does this.
Because this is common.
Yeah, this is common. I have two other negatives for these books, things that kind of like stood out to me. Number one would just be general layout. So overall, they're very good books. They're easy to read. They're also very entertaining. The books do include quite a few stories. I don't know if I told you this.
So you got to make the QR codes too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got to get back into that. So the books include a lot of little side stories. Some of them are very relevant to the actual story. And that is the starter. So in the actual starter game that we played, there are multiple jobs that the players can take on. And one of those jobs involves meeting two special characters that are referred to as grabbers, which are essentially like relic hunters, rogues, so to speak, of the realm. One of the very first stories in the Game Master's Guide is a story about these two grabbers and the situation that they're in. And it's interesting because you read this story from start to finish about how they got to where they are. And then I didn't realize until I bought the starter set and I was reading through like, okay, these are the different paths that my players can take. One of those paths is to go rescue two grabbers. And the situation that they're in is the situation from the Game Master's Guide. So
That's
it is
rad.
the short story. So as the game master, I already knew how they got there and why they were there,
Yeah.
which I thought was really cool.
Some world building that
World building, yeah. In addition to Carrie being like the kind of narrator of things, the little things that she writes in the margins is very neat. I really, really like it. There are also a smattering of QR codes throughout this book, which you mentioned, which are
so
really cool. I saw those and I was all like, well, you know, is it a real QR code? And we scanned one of them. Lo and behold, it takes you to a YouTube page and plays an audio file for you. So there are actual audio files in here, which are really cool, that you can listen to. Some of them are just on the pages, right? So they're just part of anybody that wants to read. Like if you're reading a player's guide, you'll see an audio log. You go get to listen to something cool. Some of them are actually part of the adventure, which we didn't encounter because of the choices that you guys made. But some of them are actually part of the adventure where you get to scan a thing and play back an audio file for your players to hear, which are fully like voice acted.
That's so neat
and very rich. And it's really, really kind of a neat little setup. But overall, the layout could be fixed.
Well, I mean, there was one thing you were searching for, you're telling me, that you couldn't find, right?
Oh yeah, no, I searched low and like high for specific information, and a very clean cut table of contents, or even like I said, proper sorting of a book would have really benefited to finding this information so that I can actually look it up and see exactly what that ruling is.
Yeah.
Whereas at one point when I was, you know, reading through these books, I'm sitting at my kitchen table and I have both books in front of me. I have the quick start guide from Gen Con, and I also have the actual starter game, which has 3 books to it. One is a tutorial booklet. One is the actual story of the game, and the other one is a rules quick look. And I'm looking through all of these things and cannot find the rule that I'm looking for. Which brings me to my last real negative about these books, and that is the index, which is definitely here, but kind of useless in my opinion. So the layout, like I said, leaves a little bit to be desired, but you can eventually find what you're looking for. It just could be easier. The index, however, makes absolutely nothing easy at all. So the index is, it looks like it could be useful. So like you can come on here and say like, okay, I want to know something about a follow-up, you know, like a follow-up movement.
Yeah.
And it'll come in here and it'll tell me what page I should look at. That page is not where necessarily the information on what follow-up is. That page, it just happens to be where they use the word follow-up. And sometimes it's using the word in the context that you want, and sometimes it's using the word just in a story, like in a lore story, because it looks like it was just a Control F to find this word throughout an entire PDF document.
Yeah.
These are the locations at which that word exists. So if I'm looking for breaker, so that I know what breaker does, or if I'm looking for the word shock, so this came on, I'm looking for the word shock and I want to know what the word shock does, I have about 7 pages that I can look at. Some of these pages, the word shock exists in a story, and some of them it exists in context, and then some of them it doesn't exist on the page at all. And I double checked this a couple of times just to see if it was just me going crazy. But I looked, and like one of the pages I actually had this happen. So I was looking up a term, looked in the index, and it said to find it on a set of pages. One of those pages was full art. So there's no words on that page other than the page number.
I was like, did it have like artist name or anything on the
bottom? So I thought that too, and I looked around, but there was nothing. So it was just full art. I'm not sure what happened there. But again, what it basically told me was that the index was almost useless. There's very few cases in which the index actually helped me find a rule. The easiest way for me to find a rule was to go to the table of contents and then kind of come up with, okay, I think it might be located under this section, and then go to that section and search for it in there.
Right.
And then in some cases it meant cross-referencing the game master's guide to the player's guide. So I had to kind of jump back and forth. So I think that there's just some small nitpicks, like overall for the books. They are very good. Like I was happy with them. I like how hand-holding that they are for new players, because this is a system that if you've never played a TTRPG, you could pick up these books, read them, and know exactly how to play the 2D20 system.
And it seems like complex and daunting, like just looking at them, the amount of content in there, but knowing that it just walks you through everything so well is good to hear.
Yeah, no, it's very walks you through. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Unfortunate, the index is useless, but
Yeah, so I think
hopefully
that
that'll get improved upon and later,
yeah, I would hope so.
versions.
And then this is not something like you said before that is also just these books. So confusing layout is something that like hits a lot of books and a lot of context. I think it was actually brought up in a podcast that we did with Monster Game Night when we were talking about Werewolf.
Yep.
And how that book was
B5.
incredibly confusing to find certain rules, or some rules just didn't
Yeah,
exist.
they mentioned what was it? Someone was on fire or
Yes.
something like that, right?
And the rule didn't exist.
It
for
didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing. You just had to make it up.
So by no means is this an isolated incident for Modiphius. And like I said, I'm not saying this as in like this is a horrible thing that needs to be fixed. It's just something that I observed about the book while I was reading it.
Right.
Is that you are going to have to put in a little bit more effort to find specific things, and it does not hurt to have more materials on hand. I think that I probably, I benefited a little bit from having the quick start guide, because that is a lot of information in a very small thing, and that's free, right?
Yes,
So I would
that's the
definitely
PDF.
recommend reading that PDF. And then the starter kit itself was quite amazing.
Oh, the amount of stuff you had in there between the cards and the dice and everything.
Yeah,
Wow.
I've seen a lot of starter sets for games before, and a lot of them have been simply okay, and some of them have been lackluster. Now, keep in mind, they didn't send us this. I bought this.
Right.
This is one of the best starter sets as far as bang for your buck that I have ever purchased on a TTRPG system.
Quite high praise.
Yeah. So you're getting a bunch of books. So you're getting, like I said, your 3 core books that are going to teach you how to play the game. You get 5 D20s that you can give to your players to run. You get 3 full sheets of pop-outs, which are little cardboard tokens to use to represent a bunch of things in the game, as well as NPC cards for every NPC and then some that you would encounter in the starter guide, as well as some of the stuff that you encounter in these books, as well as equipment cards and location cards that all have a ton of information on them. And these are high quality printed cards with artwork on them. Very cool. So not on the subject of the books, but really, really, really good starter set for less than $40. I think it was like 37 and change at an FLGS.
Yeah.
So that was, at our local store. A lot of value to be had in that. Do you need it? No. You could definitely run the game based on these 2 books right here and everything you have here. But the starter set is quite nice. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed my time with the 2 books. They're definitely not a book that I would feel sad about owning if I bought it.
No, and it just from playing the game, granted, I played the starter set with you, but just judging the game as a whole, right? If you didn't own the starter set and we had played a game you had made up, would the story have been different? Yes. But would we have played the same game? Yes.
Yeah.
So it would have been a slightly different package. I wouldn't have had, the cards that make it so easy to, we didn't have to sit down and like add in like numbers to a stat sheet or anything like that.
Oh yeah.
For our characters. You basically were like, which of these do you want to be? Which of these do you want to be? Here you go. Here you go. Here's this. Put this card here. Put this card here. This is your ability. This is your weapon. Boom. You got all your things laid in front of you. And that's where the starter set's like strength, I think, lies, at least on the player end. But if you had just walked us through character creation and we had either the free printout character sheets or just a piece of paper, we could have built out characters pretty easily and just written everything out. It would have been the same thing. We would have played the same game.
Yeah.
We would have went about it a different way. And as far as that goes, I had a great time with this game. And the 2D20 system, as used in Dreams and Machines, it's very quick. It's very fluid. It just knowing if something hits or doesn't hit is as simple as how many successes do I need?
Yeah.
And what kind of attack are you going for? That's going to judge that. And then you decide, well, do I want to burn this resource to roll an extra dice, or what's, how do I feel like how this is going to go? You know what? Here we go. And you roll the dice and, no, that's total whiff. Or, oh, no, I got 1, but I got 3. So, you're going to go to momentum. And it's really easy as far as that goes. And like you mentioned, you die very quickly, so you're very defensive. But you also know there's that high risk, high reward.
Yeah.
Where if most things are going down in a single hit, and you've got weapon that could do that, and you take it down, and you're comfortable with that, it's worth that risk, you know. And combat worked very smoothly for the most part. I really can't think of any issues we had.
Yeah.
Me personally, just running headfirst into most challenges, it felt like I would either be dead this turn or come out standing, and usually came out standing. I definitely took some hits, but I had a great time doing it.
Yeah. I think that this game, if I were to write a game for this, I think it would be a little bit different than what we played in the Quick Start Guide. And that's because after having played it and reading through these books, I think that one of the main reasons why combat isn't heavily focused on in these two books is because, like I said, I think combat is kind of an afterthought in this game.
Right.
Because I don't think it's the main focal point. And I think you get used to seeing a lot of combat in games and it being that forward facing thing that really has to have a lot of crunchy mechanics that go along with it. I think the 2D20 system, while simple, is pretty elegant. I know there's some people that don't like the 2D20 system and they have their opinions on it. This is the first time I've ever played on a 2D20 system and I like it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this in our Daggerheart discussion when we played with the same group, so your wife and my daughter, when at the end of the day, between the two games, I asked her, which one did you prefer? Daggerheart, or did you prefer Dreams and Machines? And she said, I liked Dreams and Machines better.
Right.
And I asked her why, and she's like, I liked the 2D20 system versus the 2D12 system because of the way the mechanics work. I really like how you have that one master skill and then, like one, slightly lower skill. And then, we're talking about this. It's actually backwards from most people realize. So a 20 is bad in this game. A 1 is excellent. Yep. So the higher number you're rolling, the worse you're doing. And she did like that idea of the 2D20 system where you have two skills and you're just looking for difficulty, right? Your successes versus your failures. I do like it a lot. And as you're reading through the player's guide and the game master's guide, it does become evident that the real drive here is your story. So it is more about the idea of a story and how you're progressing that story. And it also bleeds over, and I started to notice it in the game that we were playing as well, because when you're looking at like an area, you don't really have like a battle map per se, right? So you instead have zones. So you have like a zone that is a room here and then these connecting rooms, and then you can move from room to room or zone to zone. The enemies or people that are against you or other non-player characters are going to be in zones as well. So you're just more or less moving zones instead of having like a big gigantic sprawling dungeon.
Right.
And it's more about the environment.
You're not measuring like 5 foot squares.
No, yeah, you're not measuring
range,
squares or
range,
anything like that. Yeah,
it's zones.
Yeah, it's all zones. And as far as like range is considered, you have like ranged attack versus melee attack. That's it. There's no like range as far as like this is like so close, like 5 feet to 10 feet, like you said, or very far as this range or whatever. It's either a ranged attack or a melee attack, and the difficulty changes based on that.
Right.
Whereas there's a lot more focus on the environments, and like this is what your environment looks like, and this is how you might be able to manipulate or change this environment, and how do you want to approach this environment, and how do you want to do things. And it's got some really cool mechanics that we haven't seen in any other games also. My favorite being the supplies mechanic.
Oh, supplies was interesting. Yeah.
So you don't have inventories in this game. So you don't really have an inventory that you have to manage because they're trying to, like I said, streamline this, right? And one of the ways they do this is your character has a number of supply points from 1 to like 9 was one of our main characters. And instead of having an inventory, you have a set number of supplies that become whatever you need out of your inventory.
Right.
So if I want something like a rope, that's a supply point because it's a simple thing. And then I use that supply point and I have that rope for the remainder of the scene. If I want something like a flashlight, we're talking about like 2 to 3 supply points, depending on how complicated it is, all the way up to like making something like I pull out a two-way radio and I hand one to my partner and I use one so we can talk in different rooms now. Well, okay, yeah, you can do that, but it's going to cost you, like all your supply points, based on how many you have and how good you are at creating things. But it's just an interesting mechanic because it almost reminds me a little bit of Monster of the Week, but with rules, Whereas in Monster of the Week,
yeah.
like it's more like, okay, well, what do you have on you? I'm not gonna like, like micromanage what's in your bag. But if you tell me, like I pull out a rocket launcher, that's not gonna fly for me.
I literally, I remember that game. We're like, I have night vision goggles and
Yeah, so that's I always think about that, which was Corey was playing in a game and she was all like, I put him in a warehouse with a vampire,
right,
and I shut off all the lights, and then Corey's like, well, I pull out a pair of night vision goggles, and everybody's all like, you have night vision goggles? She's like, yeah. And I'm looking at her, and she is a military background, and she has a military bag that she brought with her.
right.
And at that point, I was all like, yeah, sure, she does. You have night vision goggles. And I let her pull those out, and I let her use them.
Yeah.
Now, if she had gone anything crazier than that, it probably would have been something different, but night vision goggles worked, and it was thematic, and it was fun, and it was easy to roll into the game versus, like pulling out something insane. Like
I have the golden gun from 007.
Yeah. Like, I have Blade's katana. I am the Daywalker. But yeah, so this is an interesting take on that, because it is a pack of whatever you need it to be, but now with restrictions.
Right.
So you are going to have to spend those supply points, right? So you're pulling, your actual consumables that are in front of you, using those to manufacture the goods that you need for that scene. And they're only good for that scene.
Could players pool supply? I never asked you this in game.
What do you mean?
Like if
like if
Corey's character Tyler, if he didn't have enough,
so
could I pull my supply?
There's no specific ruling for this. However, I would allow it in certain scenarios. Like if you're like, okay, well, I'm going to create a radio, but I only have this many supply points.
Yeah.
I would probably theme it along the lines as in like, okay, well, you have enough supply points to have the radio, but you don't have the power supply for it.
Mm-hmm.
You, however, have a power supply with this many supply points. You can pull them together, and now with your supply points, you've created a working radio.
Yeah.
Is
Rad.
how I would theme it.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, I really want to grapple up this thing, but I only have one supply point, and you only have one supply point, and you're like, well, I have the grappling hook, and you have the rope.
Yeah, right.
And that's exactly how I would rule this. And I believe that's what their intention is, although it's not explicitly stated. But that's how I would rule that and how I would run that.
Rad.
But yeah, I think supply points were probably one of my favorite things, because I really like that whole, like, it reminds me a lot of like Daggerheart with the whole, like, we're not going to say you have 300 gold coins, 27 silver, a platinum, a couple of bronze, coppers, like half pennies, whatever. This is kind of the same thing, which is we're not going to tell you what's in your bag. You're not going to have to spend 30 minutes picking out an inventory for every single scenario that you might encounter. Instead, you're going to have to manage supply points that can be replenished by spending money.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you use all your supply points, you can go back into town and be all like, okay, well, I've got this information to trade, which information is currency. Or if you have actual currency, and you can say like, I go to the market, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like, what are you going to do at the market? And you would just be like, I'm going to go buy all these cool supplies. If you want to theme it and say like, I'm going to buy this stuff or whatever, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But in reality, you're just saying, I'm going to exchange 3 coins for 3 supply points.
Right. I'm just taking supply tokens.
Yeah. And taking those supply tokens so that you can use them in the field later on.
Right.
So overall, mechanics are a lot of really interesting, fun things. The
Yeah.
D20, the supply points. I like that. As far as the game is considered, I do enjoy I always enjoy a role-playing experience over a combat-heavy experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this game, keeping combat very short, is a bonus, because the combat here, if you're looking for a combat-heavy game, like number crunching, this is not it. There are numbers here. But this is not one of those games where you're going to have like this boss has, 100 health and 14 different abilities, and it's going to take the characters, like 16 rounds to even get this thing to half life before we move to phase 2 or something like that.
Yeah.
No, the boss that we fought had 2 injuries. He had like 5 different moves, which were really cool moves.
And that was the interesting thing about him, right? Because this is like, and I think it's the reason why the starter set actually had him, because you want new players to see this big, giant, epic scale boss battle. And it's interesting that he goes down so quickly.
Yeah.
And it's almost a learning moment. Because at that point as a player, I thought this thing might have taken, like, I didn't know if we could beat this thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if it was doable as like a person with a stick. and this thing's got rockets. It's launching all over town and mass destruction. It's being shot at with guns left and right, and nothing's working. And I walk up with a stick and I go, hit, and it dies.
Yeah, so to be honest too, you guys had some incredible rolls, and I had some not so great rolls. I probably could have extended the combat a little bit, but thematically I think it worked really well, and I like the way that things were playing out to where, you know, it seemed like big stakes, but then it was all like, you know, you guys really did save the day.
We're the heroes.
Didn't lose too much of the town. You only lost one region of the town and no real people lost. But
surprisingly,
yeah, it's not a combat heavy game. And that's what I think I'm getting from this. And at first I thought maybe it was going to be a combat heavy game, because even reading the rules and then looking at the starter guide and like seeing all the different abilities that all these different things that you're fighting have. So like one repair mech could have like 6 different options for abilities that they can do, all with varying costs of threats that you're building up throughout the game to do those abilities. But in reality, you're not going to use 6 of those abilities. You're going to use 1 or 2 of them based on the scenario that you're in, and then your player's going to drop that thing like almost instantly. So the combat is made to be a little bit quicker than normal combat, to move on to, again, environmental puzzles and kind of working around things.
And you even mentioned us. I'm not sure if you mentioned it on here yet, but like the stakes are high and you could die so quickly, but the game encourages you not to kill your players.
Oh yeah, that's something we should have covered. Yeah, is that like death? They even say on here like, yeah, you can totally kill your players, but that's not the focus of our game. And they pretty much explicitly state that. They're like, to kill a player, we really want you to think about that.
Yeah,
like our game isn't designed to just die. It's designed to weaken and remove your characters from a scene, but then have them recover from that, have them come back from that. If you think it is necessary, here are the rules to actually kill a player.
Step
and you
1.
should make it like they actually use the word execution, because that's really what you're doing at this point, is you're executing a character.
Yeah.
So you're going to a character that is down, and it's almost like, you know, like somebody making death saves, and you hit them and you automatically go into another death save. Essentially, it's like your NPC or monster approaches this character and spends 2 threat to perform an execution to roll and kill this character straight up. But that is this is probably should be your last resort.
This is a story moment.
And make sure this is a story moment.
Yeah.
They're more on the idea of your players are going to fail if everybody goes down. There's a lot of creative ways to have this not be a TPK, which is kind of how they talk about it in Daggerheart, which is read the room, you know, like knowing when it's right for players to actually die or to wake up bound and gagged in a, you know, a jail cell or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like, you know, the robots haul them off to somewhere else. And they kind of also build it in too. So like the wakers are the robots when they're awake and like killing things. When they describe them and their killing sprees and like going crazy, they actually explicitly state on there that like the time frame in which these robots go on these rampages is a small window.
And that was actually one of my favorite details you read out to us, or you told us, because that's just so interesting, and it gives me so many questions.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it doesn't just feel like it's human versus machine. It makes me wonder, well, what's making these things?
Exactly.
Right.
And that's a part of the big story, like an overarching story, is what's making these things do this and why it's happening. But it's also really easy to bake that into an explanation as to why you're not just straight up dead. Because, you know, if like that robot,
if they were always around, always killing everything.
Yeah, always killing everybody, you know, everybody would be dead. And if you do have a point where, you know, I have a waker that wipes the entire party, it's not out of the realm of storyline and possibility that they all wake up with a powered down unit just standing over them with a foot over their head, ready to kill them. But it hasn't yet because it powered down.
Interesting.
So it's really interesting. And like I said, it seems to be that this game is more geared towards, number 1, first-time players, which is really good. So it holds your hand a lot. And then 2, if you're looking for something that is story-driven and heavy on the role play and not very crunchy on the combat. Could you make the combat crunchy? Absolutely.
For sure.
You could just keep burning through threat. I burned through a lot of threat in one of the encounters just because you guys went through it too fast. And I was like, oh, God, I want like more interaction with robots, so I'm just like spending threat to just pop in reinforcements as they come around the corner. You guys are knocking them down like bowling pins. It's like, all right,
Whose turn is it? Knock him down.
I
Who's
gotta
up?
stop setting these things up because they're just bowling through them
Yeah.
one after another because they only have one hit point.
Right.
So you get a really good roll and they're just down. They're down for the count.
Yeah.
So interesting. I like it a lot. It is a game that I enjoyed. I really like the books, and it's definitely on my roster for games that I would not mind running. And I'm kind of surprised that we don't see more of it.
Yeah, I never really hear about this game, which hasn't been out a full year yet.
Yeah, it hasn't. Yeah, it's still gonna get its stride, I think.
But it's rad. I'd like to see more of it, especially the 2D20 system in general. I really enjoy. We'll see if you feel the same as a player when we play Dune.
I'm interested to see how similar the systems are to each other.
I can tell you they're not 100%.
Well, yeah, that we know. Yeah,
but overall,
I don't know anything, but
the overall system is obviously the same.
Is similar, yeah.
So,
I know that you did tell me that it does focus more on role playing than combat, which makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah,
like for this game,
even yours, which you thought was going to be more combat heavy.
I thought it was going to be more combat heavy. Yeah, because there's a lot of stat blocks in here, but I guess you're only using them minimally and how you're going to use them
quickly.
Yeah, minimally and quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, as the game master, I enjoyed it, and I definitely wouldn't mind running it again.
I fully expected to at some point.
Yeah,
Corey was actually just asking me yesterday when our next game of it was going to be, because she's like, "Well, I'm going to make a new character for it." Because you had us name our characters on the spot.
Oh yeah,
and nobody else, is used to doing that other than us, really.
Yeah.
So Tempe went to like a pretty easy one, and then Corey just froze
and
looked around the room and named the first product she saw, which was me.
Yeah, the first thing she saw was you, and she just took that name. That was on me for just assuming that you guys had already come up with names.
No, we absolutely did not.
Yeah,
no, nothing.
I thought, I think the only person that even had an inkling was Tempe.
Did she know she was going to name her character?
I think so, yes. Because she had already had like this whole persona for her character planned out based on the origin story of being
I had
a
nothing
farmer.
because I wasn't sure I thought we were actually getting pre-gens similar to like mine. You asked like what I was getting, what everything was going to be, and I thought you were going to like keep sliding cards and be like, this is who you are. And then you're like, yeah, what's your name? Who are you? And I'm like, I'm Clive Broadside. Corey's like, how did you do that? You know how many times a player
This is what we do.
has asked me who someone's name was? It's Mark Fiddleston, obviously. And his brother, Tim Bruckenstein.
I've got so many of them just lined up and waiting.
Yeah. He took his wife's name when they got married.
But yeah, overall, I'm happy to have the books, and I thought it was a lot of fun.
All right. So, slight curveball then.
Oh, shoot.
You asked me how I would review the quick start of Daggerheart. How would you review the player's guide, the game master guide, and curveball, the starter set?
The starter set? Oh,
yep.
So each individually.
Yep.
Okay, so the
first two that were provided for review.
These were provided for review. I would say the player's guide is a solid, I would say 8.5.
That's solid for
I like it.
First game out the gate for this like new IP.
Yep. The player's guide is really, really good. The game master guide, however, I think goes down a couple of marks.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would probably only put this at like an 7.5 to an 8.
That's better than a couple of marks, and you drop it to an 8 from an 8.5
because of the
That's not so bad. That's pretty good.
And that's just because like I said, the game master guide is really good, but I think I like the materials included in the player's guide.
So, well, because of that
I think
too,
some of it should have been in here.
Between the poor index and the fact that this already has some of that, does that knock the GM guide down more?
A little bit, yeah. And that's why I say like the GM's guide gets a lower review than the player's guide.
Okay.
And that's just because I think that as a grouping, I think they're great.
Right.
But if we're doing them
if you're gonna run games by both,
if you're gonna run games by both, and you have to read both. I cannot stress that enough. Read both of these books. And then, like I said, the player's guide is a lot better materials and a lot more interesting materials than what's in the game master's guide. The game master's guide is good, but you definitely have both of them. The starter set that wasn't provided to us, that's like a 9.5.
Rad.
Almost a 10. Like it is great. Like it is so good. It is, like I said, one of the best starter sets that I've ever purchased for a game. And as far as materials that you were given and something that you could sit down and play with your characters, it doesn't have everything that's in these books. There's missing mechanics in there that are not in here, so they gloss over some stuff. They don't include it, but there is so much in that starter set that makes it just a great value, and that price is unbelievable because you can just go buy that and play Dreams and Machines.
Yeah,
you're good.
So I was gonna ask you then. That's a fantastic review for it. As a player, I had a great time, and I can't think of anything I would change from it. Experience wise, the cards alone, everything is just so easy. And am I wrong to assume then you would say that it's totally good to just buy the starter set, play this game, have a great time, and then if you're craving more, then buy these?
Yeah. So,
or do you think it would be better to just get the lump sum?
I think that if you're me, you're going to buy these books. And that's because the starter set doesn't have the lore background that you're going to get out of these two books. You're also going to be missing a couple of key mechanics that we did not get to play, which are key mechanics that I love from other games.
Yeah.
Like things like bonds. Those exist in this game.
Oh, sweet.
Bonds between characters.
Yeah, we didn't do that at all.
And that's during character creation. So there's a lot more that goes into character creation that we didn't touch because of the starter set, because the starter set is trying to keep things simple, stupid.
Right.
So I do believe that, yes, you can go buy the starter set and play it. And if you're interested in this game, I think you should. I think you should buy the starter set and play it. I think it's great. I think if you do that, you're going to buy these books.
Okay.
Because I think that once you play that, you're going to want the lore. You're going to want the background.
The lore was really neat. Everything in this game, from like your little robot butler guy that assimilates from little bots.
Yeah.
To like the city with the obviously going to wake up and kill everyone robot buried in the ground. It didn't.
Thank you very much.
But it will.
Yeah. But
no, said yes.
I think you buy both these books because they're solid books. There's a lot of really good information on here, and they're a really good price point for what you are getting. These are very well put together books, despite the little dings that I gave them. They're still very well put together books with a lot of very fun information and a really good read. I mean, even if you were just to buy these and just read the lore, it's worth it, because if you're interested in that kind of source material, it's really interesting.
Cool. Well, that sounds like a pretty solid review for me.
So, yeah.
You got anything else?
That pretty much covers it. That's my take on Dreams and Machines. Awesome. This is a recommend from this side of the True Strike table.
Right. As a player, yeah, I had a great time. Once again, thank you, Modiphius, for providing these. And for everyone else, thank you for sticking around this long. Until next time, I've been Tyler.
And I've been Richard.
And we've been True Strike. Bye.
Goodbye.
Hey, adventurers. Thanks again for joining us today. Please be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. If there's any questions you'd like to write into the show, you can hit us up on X, Threads, or Instagram. New episodes released every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening to True Strike.